like I said, I don't know what the fuck was going on with me, but for like, I don't know, maybe like five or 6 days, I just constantly had like I constantly had like a little bit of a headache, and it just in general, I had this like very clouded, like my eyes wouldn't, like I couldn't focus, like literally like vision wouldn't focus. I just constantly had a headache. I just felt like shit, and I was just constantly irritable for like 5 or 6 days. It was just some shit going on with
that
me.
mood, because you know I'll fuck around, and then you're gonna get mad at me, and then we're not gonna
Oh
talk
yeah,
for 2 days.
I got real
and
mad.
We'll both be fucking little girls about shit, and then all of us, then we have to make up later and then talk about it. I don't want to go through that. So if you're feeling like you're on your period, let me know, and I won't fucking bother you.
All right,
How about that?
we'll have a safe word.
Yeah, give me Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. All right,
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma's the word. Wonderful.
Do that on stream too. I'll come in hot in your chat.
Oklahoma.
And then I'll fuck
Oklahoma.
Do you know, you two would make a fascinating case study in sociology.
I'm
How
sure.
Do I even need to explain it?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But we're a different kind of asshole.
It's true.
Each
Yeah.
other.
I don't know if I would use that as the title of the study, but
A different kind of asshole.
yes, this is the official CDC statistics on a different kind of asshole.
Nice. That being said, I never got a chance to actually thank you for your support with that spy on Twitter and such. Much appreciated.
Oh no!
Oh
it's
my
no
God.
problem. What?
I fucking retweeted it too, you shit.
Yeah, but I didn't think it was necessary. But if we're gonna circle jerk this, then Dragon, thank you so much for being an
No, it's just
awesome
bigger,
and
right?
fanciful
Spy's bigger, right?
No,
and being
enough.
a fantastic friend.
Enough.
Dragon, dude, Dragon, thank you for retweeting Frosty's video. I really appreciate it.
There it is.
Unbelievable.
I have an idea.
What's that?
How about we start with the and in fact, let me see if I've got it right here.
Oh, that video made me crack up.
That was the
really,
bomb.
really
It's
enjoyed
wrong,
that video.
but it was funny as hell.
Oh, yeah.
It's wrong, but it encapsulates the impression FromSoft is giving the community so well.
It does.
My favorite part of that whole video is at the end where he's like, and the Japanese community, we fucking ignored them too. It's the best part of that whole video.
Yeah, that was
It
so
is good.
excellent.
We have to touch upon this at some point. This
It's off. It's off. It's off.
Well, that's been the big source of entertainment for me the past little while. The whole, not necessarily the Poise argument, but all the shit that's come about because of Poise and the confusion within the community, and like just this idea of, oh well, clearly FromSoft has no idea that their game has a value that's just turned off. Like clearly they have no idea what they're doing. It's just simply turned off. And we'll just inform them, and everything will be perfectly fine. No, like what the fuck do you think? Like,
I think the most interesting thing about the Poise arguments is you can definitely tell what game a person preferred based on their argument, and I find that like fun, and it's kind of interesting. That's why I'm so surprised by your stance, Frosty, seeing as how you're a Dark Souls 1 guy, and all the Dark Souls 1 people are like, bring back Poise, all of them.
I played Dark Souls 1 the most, but my preference is still Demon Souls, and Dark Souls 3 is most similar to Demon Souls.
That is all right. I'll give you.
Well,
that.
in terms of Poise and hyper armor right now, yes, it is. But it's the same for me, Dragon. Where I prefer Demon Souls above all. I spent 4,500 plus hours in Demons, probably another 4,000 in Dark, and the Poise system in Dark Souls 1 has some blatant inherent disadvantages.
Oh, it does. Oh, it does.
You know, I don't want that shit coming back. I don't like insta-kill Hornet Chaos Great Club backstabs any more than you do.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, how often are heavy weapons actually used in Dark Souls 1? If we're really going to talk about Dark Souls 1.
Every time I do PvP.
Well,
yeah, but you know.
No, but
Yeah,
like
no,
realistically,
I know what you mean,
no one used heavy weapons. And if they did, it was a Hornet Great Club just constantly fishing for backstab. No one actually swung with the weapon.
Crystal Great Club, baby. Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Fair and balanced.
People used to swing with the Black Knight Great Axe in one hand until that got nerfed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I see. Coming from the big thing about Poise with me is because I'm coming from Dark Souls 2. If you could if you say use like the Cow Priest build or whatever to actually take advantage of true poise in that game, if you did that and you could manipulate yourself in a position where you know you'd poise through attacks, you lost all fear of PvP. It encouraged the most sloppy play from anybody using a build like that, and they just knew.
Which game
they
are we
could get
talking
you.
here?
Dark Souls 2. You could do stuff like that with poise. I mean, it was pretty bad. It wasn't as consistent, but you could do it and rely on it and say, it doesn't matter what you do, I'm about to trade with you, and it's gonna fucking hurt. And I'm gonna do a ton of damage, and you're gonna be mad about it, and it doesn't matter what you do. And that was that kind of mentality, that sloppy play mentality with poise. I can't stand that. Anything that's rewarding a player for getting hit, fuck you. Like, I hate that.
It is neat because I would browse the subreddits, and like different posts would pop up of like, dude, the S-Dog is broken strong. I don't know how to deal with it. And it's some heavy weapon user being like, okay, how do I deal with people who are using S-Dogs and who are good? And then you get a different post of someone who's like, how do I deal with people with Zweihanders? They just constantly combo me. They just poise through my attacks. I can't do anything. Right. It's just like, well, you get both sides of this coin because it's not really heavy weapon versus fast weapon or fast weapon versus heavy weapon. It's new player versus better player. And this is like, they're both viable. They both have different options. Actually, one of the things that I was talking about on the stream today is like, the PvP in this game reminds me much more of like a fighting game than anything else, where you have reliance on the moveset of the weapon itself, how well it pokes, how well you can space, how well you can zone control, timing your attacks properly, and actually playing to your weapon's strength. If you have a Zweihander or something like that, you can't really play aggressive in the same way you can be aggressive with a longsword. Right. You just can't. Like heavy weapons need to be much more reactive. Like you react to what your opponents are doing and punish poor plays or poorly timed attacks, things like that. And
yeah, we just call that passive.
Yeah, you gotta play passive, right? But I kind of compare it to like someone, I don't know, if you're like playing Street Fighter, like an S-Stock or like a straight sword is like Chun-Li, where you poke really well, you got fast attacks. Whereas like heavy weapons are like Zangief. You've got hyper armor.
I know exactly what you're getting at here with the grappler analogy, Frosty, because a grappler is a more reactive type of character.
Correct. Because it's it's stronger, but it's not as easy to do certain things. And I just think people don't. I think there's an expectation that people have where it's much more convenient or it's much easier for the game to change as opposed to them changing.
You're using an analogy, remember, of a game that is balanced. I mean, imagine that situation where Chun-Li does double the damage of Zangief.
Sure. Well, the whole point I'm saying is I'm not necessarily saying that the game is currently perfectly balanced. I do think there are issues. I think the straight swords, I think the S-Dog are too strong. I think they need to use way more stamina on a swing. But I'm just saying, in terms of the actual design and the concept of how the game's currently playing out with a system that uses hyper armor as opposed to poise, that's a much more preferable system. Because
I agree with that.
Right. But there's still definitely some clear balance tweaking that needs to happen. I'm not going to pretend like that's not the case, but I just think the actual system that we have in place is preferable.
I could agree with that. I think my major issue is just the, you got weapons that are the fast weapons that do the same amount of damage as, a great curved sword.
Yeah, it's real dumb.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of shit is like, okay, well, why would I use it?
And I didn't know how egregious that was until Brandon uploaded recently what was intended to be a joke video, Dark Swords 3, I think it was entitled.
Yes, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that kind of, and I mean, yes, it was kind of a collection of extreme cases, but having watched that since, but having not really done much PvP in the game up to now, other than a little bit of, a few people invaded while I was doing co-op in the high wall on a new character kind of PvP. Having watched that, I think now I have a much better sense for what it is people are upset about.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if something could be done to somewhat tweak that.
Oh, I get it. I get it entirely. I understand why people are upset. But my argument again is, if there are issues, address those issues specifically.
Yes,
Like,
with the weapons.
Address the
not
weapons
change
themselves.
a
Don't
huge-ass
change
mechanic. Yeah.
exactly. Don't change the mechanics of the game. Don't try to band-aid fix something with this quick solution fix that affects all attacks across the board in its entirety. Right? Like,
I suspect, to be entirely honest, is probably why Poise was turned off in the first place.
Sure.
Because I think that's why they turned it off, because they knew what was going on in Dark Souls 1. They must have heard, because they were listening to somebody when they made a bunch of those changes in Dark Souls 2. I can only imagine whom, but so they must have decided, well, why don't we just try it with no poise?
Well, and
players?
remember, for anybody listening right now, we don't know if it is turned off. There's something like there's a bunch of shit that is being thrown around right now on Reddit. Even today, there was something, posted. And so just to reiterate, we don't know. I think that's the safest thing to say is we don't really know how Poise works yet.
Well,
Yeah,
they've claimed, there was the official statement through the Kotaku article a few days ago where the journalist had, and I forget which journalist it was, but I've heard good things about his credibility up to now. I'm not familiar with him personally, but the real point of contention with his article was supposedly he contacted FromSoft through Bandai Namco, and Bandai Namco came back to him and said, FromSoft has told us that Poise is working as intended and that its current level of usefulness within the game is what FromSoft wants. So maybe turned off is the wrong word. We're getting that from a previous Reddit thread where people had claimed to have found the hex value of Poise in the game, and were switching it from 0 to 1 and seeing, wow, with it turned back on, with this 0 being changed to 1, it's just like Dark Souls 1 Poise. So they claimed in the Kotaku article that Poise is still in effect in the game, but that it is, and I quote, much more situational. So far, not too many people seem to have found a situation in which they've actually noticed any difference of Poise from what I've been hearing. And that's really the point of contention here.
one of the really interesting things that I don't think a lot of people really consider or really know about is FromSoft is pretty notorious for leaving unused code and unused assets in the game files.
Yes,
Yes,
as
like,
our
so-
good friend
so-
Greg Gibb has demonstrated
Yeah.
many a time.
Well, this is another thing. Well, people are making the assumption that I don't know the specifics of exactly what the code looks like or whatever, but let's say it is fully functional Poise and it's just a value that's toggled. That doesn't necessarily mean it was developed specifically for this game or intended to be used in this game. It could just be leftover code from Dark Souls 1 or whatever. Or it could be leftover code that they've repurposed to do certain other aspects of the game. Maybe that's how the Perseverance toggle works in this game, that the Perseverance weapon art turns that value from 0 to 1, and then it lasts for a duration. Or maybe that's how it works for the talismans. If you actually look at like Dark Souls 1, the Gravelord mechanic used Demon Souls world tendency. It was the same coding for world tendency that determines whether or not you will be Gravelord, or you will have your world like
Have the Red Phantom show up, though?
Basically fucked.
yeah.
by Gravelord.
Basically, that's what it does. If you get Gravelorded, if your world gets Gravelorded, you get the red phantoms in your world, and you can invade the Gravelord host or whatever. The game basically just turns it into pure black tendency. Like in the actual code, it's functionally equivalent, and we know this because of the debug mode that was accidentally, released on Steam.
Whoops.
So it's amusing to me because a lot of people might, if we're going to draw a parallel or kind of the same consideration, a lot of people might be like, oh, well, clearly Dark Souls 1 intended to have world tendency, but that was just disabled. It was just turned off.
Yeah, I mean, they're notorious for that. That is true. So
Right.
we'll have to see.
No. I'm just saying, like,
There are other things that aren't even from Souls games. I think I remember seeing that Gibbed or somebody dug up a model of an enemy from Ninja Blade in Demon's Souls.
what? Seriously? That's amazing.
Yeah, it was like a low res model of a Hydra from Ninja Blade, I think, was in the Demon's Souls data.
That's hilarious.
Man.
Well,
So-
think about Bloodborne, the network test of Bloodborne. You could get out of bounds in the one area, and then you could go fight like all these other bosses that weren't complete or whatever, because none of that was restricted or removed from the playable demo. It was literally just the whole code, and they just kind of haphazardly tried to block it off. That's just how FromSoft is as developers.
They don't even in Dark Souls 3 so far. I saw an Imager thread where somebody has already been digging around in the Dark Souls 3 data files and found some content that is not yet enabled or accessible in the game, some equipment mainly.
Yeah, I've seen that.
You know, so yes, this is absolutely the case for FromSoft games, and they do absolutely reuse code. And yeah, Frosty, it's possible that the Poise coding that was found by the folks over on Reddit was just a vestige from a previous game. Certainly is possible, but it is also possible, and just this is the kind of thing that I get the sense, just knowing how much these games change leading up to their release. And you can, I don't want to give specific examples for fear of violating NDA, but I'm trying to think back to things that were shown in trailers that didn't make it into the final versions of the games. I'm sure others can come up with examples, but things get cut, things get changed, and balance changes happen at the last minute where FromSoft will look at something and say, wait a minute, we think this breaks the game in a way that's genuinely injurious. We'd better just disable it or remove it or quickly replace it with something else. Another thing that FromSoft does, and this has been addressed before by others as well, is rather than polish a game in the weeks and months leading up to going gold when the game is content locked and they have to have everything except maybe some of the game text set in stone for retail, rather than polish what they've already got, FromSoft will continually try to add things to their games with the intention of fixing problems and balancing it via patches after release. Now, there are pros and cons to this. The pros are that you get more content in the game. The con is that the content sometimes tends to come in patches or as DLC, and often, as we find with game balance, FromSoft just makes it up as they go along after release, you know? So this business with Poise could also be a case of that.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is like the network test. It's not as if it was a different mechanic in the network test, which was quite a while ago. Like the game functioned in the exact same way at the network test than it does now. So,
right down to summoning, I think, with hosts, with phantoms being a higher priority for random invaders.
Higher priority. I think that might have changed a little bit, but because I don't think it was even possible if you didn't have a phantom in your world to get invaded.
I think it happened like once or twice. I think there was just so many people. Yeah, there were so many people playing it at the time. I mean, I don't know. I'm just going off what people said.
We
I wasn't cool
about
enough
then.
to get a beta code. So
either way, the point is like even if that was the same, or maybe that did change, like the system for Poise or Hyper Armor, whatever you want to call it, was the same then as it is now.
Yeah, and we talked about then that some of the things we were seeing in the network test in terms of maybe combat, or particularly I think in the context of matchmaking, maybe not so much combat now that I think about it, that those may have been designed specifically for stress testing of connections server-wise for the network test. So, you know, that may not be relevant anyway, now that I think about that. But
I think that the takeaway though is that we just don't know. So to make assumptions is not a good this is not a good strategy.
The only way we could find out for certain what the deal is with Poise would be to ask somebody from FromSoft. And I think that the takeaway from this El Risitas parody is one way or the other, FromSoft is not going to tell us.
No,
I don't think
they never do. They never do.
But we can just make a petition, or we can just contact someone from FromSoft, and that'll
because
clearly...
I'm sure that's not been done before, and we've totally gotten responses from FromSoft that were useful or meaningful.
No one's ever tried to contact FromSoft. No one. Nobody in the community.
Nobody's ever tried to contact FromSoft about the soft bans, and of course, everyone's gotten completely useful and helpful answers back about those.
Well, I'm going to
forget.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of share a little story that we actually had talked about previously, Spy, while I was doing the Dark Souls 1 musical, which is basically like, you know, we had tried to contact FromSoft for Dark Souls 2. We really did. We went through Namco Bandai. We basically, and I say we as in other members of Soulbrand and some other community members, kind of tried to put together a comprehensive list of our concerns or things that we thought might be problematic for Dark Souls 2 when the game was first coming out. Things like the fact that elemental damage was way too high on weapons, and buffs were too strong, and heavy armor was too strong, and soul memory wasn't ideal, and like we had like 3 or 4 pages of stuff that we thought was worth mentioning, right? And we even went through Namco Bandai. We got it translated. We got it sent across directly to FromSoft, and nothing really changed as a result of it, like, at all. And that kind of set the tone for my stance or my viewpoint on how correspondence with FromSoft goes, which is basically non-existent. And I think even yourself, like as a member of the guide, like doing something official for the game, you guys trying to get into contact with FromSoft was not exactly a walk in the park. But...
Well, correspondence between the West and Japan is very difficult. As you say, it often has to be translated. And even when you have a dedicated translator working with you to get that stuff over, FromSoft's PR department is kind of a generous term at this point. It consists of, I think, 2 or 3 people. It's headed by a gentleman named Ogura. And to the best of my knowledge, Mr. Ogura was the only or one of the only people handling correspondence with both their Western and their Japanese communities. And so this is why they tend to offload correspondence with their Western communities in particular on their Western publishing partners. But then, given how little difference seemed to be made when you guys sent that list of suggestions over, the only thing I can think is happening is that either FromSoft is not prioritizing it, that it gets sent to whomever is responsible for receiving that correspondence from the West and just sits in his email box for a week and is never read, or it gets deleted immediately because fuck it, that's not my concern. And or that it's something like that, or that it just gets lost in translation, or that FromSoft says, well, we are not obligated to listen to the people who are buying our games in terms of the balance changes. This is our game to make, and we are not going to consider external feedback. And I think that's a very valid possibility, considering the Japanese attitude toward privacy and ownership of information. And in this case, we're talking game-related information. So it could be any number of things. Again, this gets back to your point about, should we even be trying to speculate since we don't really know?
Well, I don't think we're really going to have an impact in general. Like, I understand that it's cathartic to kind of discuss these things and have, you know, shitty conversations and constructive conversations, things like Reddit or on stream or in a podcast like this. But I don't for one second pretend like it's going to have any kind of real impact on FromSoft at all. Like,
oh no, I don't.
Video,
I've never expected that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the video that I made, like I had a lot of comments, like, you know, why are you even making this video? Like, FromSoft's not going to listen to you. I'm like, yeah, I realize, but it's not for FromSoft. It's for the community to get a different perspective on this topic of Poise, and to kind of explain myself. Like, honestly, a lot of me making that video was just super selfish. Of, if I get a question related to Poise, as opposed to having to fucking repeat myself entirely again, it's just go watch this. Go watch the video. That should give you an idea. Right.
That's why I made that red soapstone video.
Which one?
I got tired of the red soapstone video. I got tired of explaining where it's at in the Japanese version. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Go watch this. Go watch this.
Where you get signed, please sign. Where it's signed, tell me sign, please. Doing honorable duels. Thank you, please.
I've had to do the same thing with Twitter posts with questions and comments I repeatedly get from, you know, and these are things. I've addressed so many questions in the commentary of videos I upload, and yet people still ask. So there comes a point which you can make videos answering questions, you can make a pinned Twitter post answering a question. You can't cure people who are too lazy or unmotivated to...
You can't fix stupid!
That's one way to put it, you know?
Yeah.
But Frosty, having said that, I think the Poise video was valuable in other ways as well. It was valuable to me just to understand what the issue was and why it was a problem, having not had the chance. I'm not even done playing Dark Souls 3 yet because I'm bound to a a let's play of it, and I can't play it when I'm not recording it, and I can't record it all the time. So I'm not even done with the game. I've barely had a chance to do anything even remotely multiplayer related. So that was helpful for me to just figure out what's the problem here. What are people up in arms about, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if you remove the PvP portion of it, a lot of people are real upset at how strong rats and dogs are, because they're the strongest enemies in the game. Just stun like
Yeah.
God, the rats and fucking dogs. I can't even fucking imagine how incompetent a player must be to just to literally single out dogs and rats as the single most dangerous thing in a fucking Souls game. Yeah, okay, they're annoying, but they're not oh my god.
You know, I have to wonder about that though, because like I'm now up at the point where I've fought a couple of the great sword wielding Lothric Knights, right? How can somebody, I mean, yes, the dogs and rats are annoying enemy types, the dogs especially, but like how can you get to the point of fighting one of the great sword wielding Lothric Knights and go, no, fuck those fucking dogs. Boy, I want those dogs gone from the game.
I mean, well, it's like the same thing I feel about those what are those? The Outriders, the Frost dudes.
Oh, the Pontiff Knights?
No.
No. Yeah, the
big
big ones that
fucking
crawl on all four. The Boreal
fours
Knights.
with the long swords. The one that you see at the bottom of the tower with the giant.
Yeah.
shooting-
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. The
straight
mini
out of
boss from the
Bloodborne
network
guys.
test. Yeah.
Yes.
I
Okay.
hate those dudes more than anything in this entire game. I mean, they drive me out of my fucking mind because I just know I see them like that's a Bloodborne enemy. And I know that because the friends I have, including Lady Canton, who really kind of enjoyed Bloodborne and played through the Bloodborne PvE a lot and did
I
a lot
like
of stuff.
those enemies. They're pretty good.
They have no problem killing those things. They're like, what's wrong with you? And then here's me as a Souls person, I'm like, gosh, they just never fucking stop swinging. They never stop. What the fuck is this? Fuck that thing. And you can really see like where you come from as a player by what you complain about in Dark Souls 3, and it's fun
true.
that way. But I fucking hate those things, and people are complaining about fucking rats and dogs. My dick.
I mean, I understand the frustration. The frustration is, okay, well, I'm wearing heavy armor. I've got Havels on. I don't want to get stunned by these little shitty enemies, and I get it. But that need shouldn't take priority over balance of the game on the whole. And while it is annoying that those little enemies can stun lock you, I mean, that's the purpose of those little enemies. That's the purpose of having a group of rats, because they pose a threat in numbers. But the game gives you so many fucking tools to deal with it. You can attack from range. You can use consumables. You can use a myriad of different weapon attacks and weapons themselves. Like, even a longsword has hyper armor on the stance R2. Like, you have so many options, and people just want to go in and just start fucking smashing the R1 button and just win. And it's like,
well, and people want you as I'm hypothetically, people want me as an uploader of Souls content to play that way too. I've gone through the majority of the game so far with a pure strength build. I've not leveled dexterity at all. The only ranged weapon I've been using is a crossbow, and I've been using it a lot because there are a lot of situations in Dark Souls 3 where, hey, look over there, there's a group of 6 rats. Or look over there, there's a really powerful enemy surrounded by smaller, faster enemies that are going to stun lock me to death if I run in there like an idiot while the big guy flattens me. And I've been yelled at so much for using a crossbow to deal with those situations. No, you fucking idiot, go in and mash R1, or else you're fucking casual. It's like, no, that's what crossbows are there for.
I mean, you're not the only one that's going through it. I know that.
No, I'm far from the only one.
I know that Pat and them are having problems. I know
Marcus,
yeah, Jesus, what a spit in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel, I just feel so much sympathy for that guy. I mean, damn.
And the worst part of it is people are mad at him for disabling comments, to the extent that I've gotten comments on my series saying things like, thank you for keeping your comments open. I stopped watching Marcus's videos because he disabled comments. It's like, what do you want from us?
This game is intended to be played slow and methodical and come to the best decision on how do I go about approaching this encounter. Like, every encounter is intended to be thought out, as opposed to just, I'm just going to fucking come in and start swinging. Like, that's actually one of the reasons why I've really enjoyed watching Marcus's playthrough, because he'll take stuff real slow. He doesn't die very often at all, aside from like boss fights, which is understandable.
Mm.
But yeah, like it's very different seeing someone like that play, and then seeing like some other, I won't name names, but if I'm watching like a Twitch stream of someone who's brand new to the game, who I know from like other games, and you watch them play, and it's just like, oh, they don't understand. I mean, they don't get it in the same way as someone like Marcus or whatever would. But it's just
well,
neat.
and on the other side of that, I've been criticized for being too slow, which is an unfortunate function of the fact that I'm playing the game blind with live commentary. So my blind live com pace is incredibly, brutally slow. And
Well, you're not looking at rocks, are you? You're just looking at.
no, I'm not looking
at
at rocks,
rocks
but
and
I've been through the same area many times, and it's taken me about 18 episodes of messing around in the early game just to get the feel for, okay, this is how things are similar to the previous games, and this is how things are different. And I've been raging a lot, which for me doesn't look like yelling and screaming and throwing things, but it looks more like getting annoyed by everything and seeing everything as unfair for, you know, my first impressions. And people have been furious at me over that, bizarrely, because I think they were expecting me to just go in with, you know, perfect clarity the first playthrough. But
no, it's not about expectation of you. It's what they've already experienced. These people did the exact same thing, but now that they're ahead of you and they're 40 hours into the game or 60, whatever it is, you know, they of course can handle it like, you know, they're professionals. Now, they didn't do that their first playthrough, but they don't remember that, and so they see you doing it and go, Jesus, what the fuck is wrong with you? Oh God, like you can't figure out this one thing? Well, you're an idiot. I mean, it took me 8 hours to do it too, but I forgot that because I'm retarded and I wanted to post about it on a YouTube comment.
Go ahead, Frosty.
The thing that I find hilarious is that the selective memory that a lot of people seem to have.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, you bring it up there, but I think another great example of that is just in how a lot of people discuss this game relative to the previous games as far as like PvP balance or anything like this.
Oh, yeah.
The game's been out for just over a month, like worldwide release. This game, as it is right now, is the most balanced a Souls game has ever been on release.
Yeah, I agree.
By far, not even
I agree
close.
I agree with that.
Do people not remember what Dark Souls 1 looked like or what Dark Souls 2 looked like a month into the release?
Or what Demon Souls still looks like, because they never
patched it, yeah.
And if you had something like the running Firestorm shit from Demon Souls in Dark Souls 3, or even Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 1, because you had the spell swapping glitch in Dark Souls 1 at launch, and they did eventually patch it out.
Well, that's because you could do such obnoxious shit like take the Stone Greatsword, tumble buff, or spell swap buff onto it, use the Tranquil Walk of Peace special on that, and the Tranquil Walk of Peace would have an attack rating value. So it would just be in an area of effect constant degen, and you couldn't roll around or get out of it.
When it would be like an HP erosion of something like 120 HP a tick.
Like, it was more than that. Yeah, and you couldn't roll. You couldn't get away. And they would just run at you with their fucking stupid sword. And it's like, oh, well, I'm instantly dead. And
there's so much shit in Dark Souls 2. People forgot what they patched out. Everybody forgets the Jesus water. The super fast throwing fucking holy water that did like 300 fucking... Everybody forgot about that.
I remember that.
I remember the Jesus water. That was bullshit.
How many people remember the engraved gauntlets glitch that I found out and had patched?
Oh yeah, the well, you know, that's what amazes me though, because for all we look at FromSoft and say, yeah, they don't listen, you know, they're listening to someone somewhere.
Well, so this is going back to that discussion on the stuff that we sent across to FromSoftware. We know for certain that at least some stuff gets through to them, because I had found the engraved gauntlets glitch. I made a video about it. I made a private video about it. I sent the video to Jay, who's the Namco community manager, and he forwarded it across to FromSoft, and within a week it was fixed. Right? And then
go ahead.
And then we sent that document across, and one of the things listed in the document was that the barrel armor still existed in the game.
This is the part that's most hilarious to me, and I think most telling. Go
ahead.
So
I still don't necessarily know if us telling them, or even if they saw it, or they just already knew about it and they were going to fix it anyways. But one of the things that we had mentioned in that article was that the barrel armor from Dark Souls 2 was still in the game files, and people were basically finding ways to equip it and have it available or whatever, right? And we sent the article across, and within, I don't know, like a week and a half or so, it was removed from the game. Nothing else from that article was ever addressed or changed, but they removed the barrel armor. And it's in about the same time frame as when I sent the video for the glitch of the engraved gauntlets. So I'm inclined to believe that they read it, they saw it, like, oh shit, people found the barrel armor. We better fix that. And nothing else got changed. And it's like,
you know, the cynic,
disheartening.
The cynic in me is inclined to believe that as well, Frosty. But even trying to look at that from a more objective and rational point of view, this goes back to what I mentioned before about, I really think that Fromsoft just has a very skewed set of priorities in terms of game balance and game design.
Sure.
Where, you know, and this is perpetually the issue, isn't it? Where there's been this whole argument, and I'm not even at this point sure where I stand on it anymore, of the people from Soft apparently has been listening to and or simply trying to accommodate have been of the set of priorities that, hey, let's make all of these changes to the game to make it, I don't know, easier or more accessible, etc. But when I hear about stuff like this, I have to wonder, what is it that they're trying to prevent people from accessing hidden stuff in the data files? What is their goal with having the set of priorities that would make them remove the barrel from the game before addressing any of the other balance issues, other than stuff that, you know, the engraved gauntlets and whatnot being blatantly broken and abusable?
Mm-hmm. I think it comes down to them they don't care about your playthrough. They don't care about people's experience. They care about their stuff not being used as intended. They hate that. They've always hated that, and that's the same thing with the barrel. And they don't care about your experience. They don't care if the weapon, you know, is too much, or if a piece of armor is too much. They don't care about that. They'll patch it later. What they do care about is, you know, the safety of their content.
I think that's it right there. Like, because you had mentioned that a little bit earlier, Spy. It's like the privacy of their own content of their own game. Like, they don't release information in terms of like how stuff works. They don't release formulas on damage or even any kind of explanation on mechanics. Like, we still don't know what the fuck Poise does, and they've had like multiple apparent official responses to it. I think it's just a matter of like, they have a very specific vision of the game. If you don't enjoy it, fuck off. This is how we're going to do it.
Welcome to Japan.
And it's just, there's no intention for you to find stuff that's not intended to be found. And when you can, they have big problems with it. Like, think of like what happened with Dark Souls 1 when the debug version got released. Like, they were banning people and taking channels down. Like, if you were using fucking oh my god, I can't remember his name, Durante's fix, you would potentially get banned. Like, they fucking lost their shit when that came out. It just, I don't know.
Well, and that's not without precedent either. I mean, maybe that was part of the precedent, but then with the soft ban issue, it's the same thing. Anything that interacts with the exe file for the game in any way whatsoever. I remember Bandai Namco put out a list for Dark Souls 2 of different programs that would get you soft banned, and like 360cc was on it, like controller support programs.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
You know, and so, Dragon, you're absolutely right that this is something I personally see as they are not on board with anybody using their material in a way they did not intend. And this is endemic to Japan. This is not just Fromsoft. And this is one of the reasons Japanese companies in particular, and maybe Nintendo probably being the worst of them, have been so bad with copyright claims and DMCA takedowns of video game related content. Smart developers who understand that this is community interaction and that fostering that develops a healthy relationship with their fans, they've been more laid back about it. But we go back to the subject of Japan being, especially Japanese developers having the xenophobic, insular attitude of, no, why would we do anything to foster community? This belongs to us. It is our property. And we, and only we, should be the ones to determine how it is used. And there's some level of fairness in that point of view. But it's unfortunate because by insisting on having that stance, what is Nintendo doing to their community? You know, I've not bought a Nintendo product for years because I can't do anything with those on my channel. You know, what am I gonna?
And they always act like it's a favor to you. That's why their economy's been the same way since the late 80s. It's just they don't evolve. They don't look at new things. They don't see how other companies are doing things. They just do it the way they want to do it. You're going to experience their vision or bust, period. And that's the way, I mean, that's the way the Japanese are. That's the way their mentality is. And then that's not, it's unfortunate that they're like that. I don't know exactly what cultural thing separates them from, you know, not us, but I mean, even their neighbors aren't even that bad. But the Japanese specifically will say, no, this is the way we're doing it. And you don't like it, too fucking bad.
There was a great article, actually an interview with Keiji Inafune, of all people, whom I think, unfortunately, given the fiasco over Mighty Number 9, has maybe lost a little bit of his credibility since then. But this interview comes from, I think, 2007 or 2008, shortly after Mega Man Legends 3 was canceled. And Frosty, I'm going to give this to you so that you can maybe link it wherever you're going to upload the podcast, so that people can read this. But this is very poignant and on point, where Inafune talks about how he worked in the Japanese development industry for decades and constantly was running up against this wall of nobody is open to new ideas. No one wants to be the first one to do something different. And this is a Japanese cultural thing in general. This isn't just related to video game development. It's the fear of standing out, the fear of being different, the social expectation that you will conform and go with the flow and do what everybody else is doing and not rock the boat. And that obviously, you know, logically carries over into their attitude toward game development, where, as Dragon, you were describing, they seem to treat game development as, well, we are going to do what we do, and our customers either will accept it or fuck them. Whereas maybe the Western game industry has been quicker to adapt and to try and change with trends. This is something that Iwata was quoted as complaining about on a number of occasions, that he was running into problems with this at Nintendo, that, you know, he had ideas of things he wanted to do differently. The people that he had to work with would not hear any of it. Inafune has talked about this, and this is why people like Castlevania, what's his name, Koji Igarashi, have taken to Kickstarter so that they don't have to deal with people on a board of directors or, you know, shareholders or trustees telling them, no, you can't innovate, fuck that, you know?
Well, I mean, at the risk of making it sound like a history thing, I mean, it's just, you have to remember the Western countries, you know, the U.S. or any country in Europe, they've spent the last 1,000 years catering through international trade. They cater to international trade. What is popular to the Dutch? What is popular in Afghanistan? What's popular on the Silk Road? What's popular? Let's cater to that and make some money. They've been doing that for 1,000 years, as opposed to Japan, which has never had to do that ever. They've never had to cater to other countries. I mean,
they've gone out of their way not to do that. Their borders were closed up until...
Exactly. That's they've never had to experience, you know, catering to another audience that is completely different to their own.
Well, so here's an interesting thought. And again, this is something that we've discussed amongst ourselves previously. But if FromSoft was not that way, would we still have Souls as we have it now? Like, think about how a lot of companies are pushing out just whatever is popular, whatever is convenient. I don't want to name names, but if Call of Duty fucking keeps putting out the same goddamn shit over and over again, I'm going to lose my mind. But like,
I've been saying that for like 8 years, though.
Yeah, well, but I mean, like, if Souls was much more impressionable by the community or by the developers, or sorry, not the developers, the publishers, like, how different would the game look? Would it be more casual friendly? Would it just be completely different in terms of difficulty? Would it ever have even started to begin with? Because you got to understand, Demon's Souls was a huge risk. And Miyazaki was just like, this is the game I want to make, fuck off. Well, I'm making it. And
I get that there are Western companies that do that too, but see, like, you say that, but I could also bring up the argument that you know, people are saying Dark Souls 3 is just Dark Souls 1 2.0, because they're just going with what works, what they know people want, what people complain
But
about,
I think
because Dark Souls 2 is like a bad memory. I mean, I'm just saying, this same group of people who would say, oh, Souls is magical because the company's retarded. They're still they're still doing, what other companies do, just badly, I would say.
I suppose.
Well, and Frosty, you also have to consider Demon Souls would have happened regardless, because the way it came about in the first place is it was supposed to be something else entirely. It was handed to Hidetaka Miyazaki basically as a throwaway project with very little budget. They gave it to him and said, all right, fucker, this is yours. Do whatever you want with it. We're not expecting anything great. But, have fun. Get back to us when you're finished.
Really?
And he did. And then, after that, things took off. And I feel like only after Demon Souls, at the point at which the Souls games began becoming popular, Dark Souls 1 became a genuinely big hit.
Well, Demon Souls was initially a flop, was it not? It wasn't until afterwards.
That's what I'm saying. Demon Souls didn't sell a lot in the beginning. It was discovered later and became a niche hit. And then so they said, well, look, this is somehow proven. It's sold something like 250,000 units long after release. It just sales picked up drastically. I feel like only after that point, only after the point of Demon Souls, the point at which the series began gaining in popularity, only at that point was there a vociferous enough and large enough audience clamoring for the game that FromSoft might have actually had any requests from the community to listen to in the first place, So I think Demons would have played out the way it did no matter what. From that point on, from Dark Souls 1 onward, I think, yes, FromSoft would have been increasingly susceptible maybe to community requests if we're going with the idea that, yeah, FromSoft is different and they do whatever their community tells them to, no holds barred. If we're going with that hypothetical situation, only after Dark Souls 1, I think, is that relevant. But that having been said, I still think that the popularity of the series was very largely ascribed to President Miyazaki himself. And I don't really see him as being the sort of person who listens to outside feedback very much. So I don't...
Well, yeah, he's Japanese. They don't do that.
Well, no, but besides that... no, just I'm not talking about stereotypes and generalizations here, just the way that he designs games, having read so many interviews of him talking about what influences him and what sorts of things he likes when he's making a game and when he's playing a game even. I get the sense that he probably is not the most compromising person on those sorts of things. And, you might tell him, hey, yeah, maybe it'd be great if you could fix this completely broken shit with the engraved gauntlets, and he might look at that and go, oh yeah, that's a huge problem. But
that's not how I intended it. Maybe that's
exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like as long as it's the way he intended, he probably is not the sort of person who would listen to other people on that.
I wonder, I'm thinking of this now, actually. I wonder if the development process of Dark Souls 2 is an indication of this. Like, let's say Miyazaki had a very specific design goal or vision in mind for Dark Souls 2, and when Shibuya didn't quite meet that expectation is when a lot of those changes happen. I'm talking about this in a very cryptic way. For people who aren't necessarily aware,
let's just cut right to the chase. First of all, the Design Works interview for Dark Souls 2 is where the vast majority of this comes from, and I am amazed that Tanimura was as open as he was in that interview.
Because that's not typical. That's not typical for Japanese developers.
Not at all. Like, straight up admitting to that kind of thing. That is... So go ahead, Frosty, now that that's established.
So there's a Design Works interview with Tanimura of Dark Souls 2, and one of the things that he says, like I think is the very first question, is like something along the lines of, Dark Souls 2 had a pretty rough development. What was your experience as director, especially filling the shoes of Miyazaki? And one of the things he says is like, well, I mean, I wasn't director from the get-go. I took my position midway through development because we had to rethink the entire game, and we had to repurpose assets that we currently had, and we would have liked to have started fresh, but we couldn't because of time constraints. And that's basically a pleasant way of saying the initial director, Shibuya, was more or less removed from his position because the game was not being designed in a way that fit the vision, if you will, I guess. And that's actually my assumption, that it didn't fit the vision. But there was problems with the development, and he was basically removed from his position. And then Tanimura was brought in as more or less a salvage job.
Well, and
I
if
think
the
he
game
did a
had
fantastic
originally
job.
If the game had originally fit the vision, why would they have replaced the director, right?
Well, yeah, I suppose that is a fair assumption, but
I mean unless he got caught sleeping with the board member's wife or something, but you know.
Well, one of the other things that
Miyazaki, creative dictator.
Yeah.
I don't. This is.
Well, one of the other things that
for the sake of argument
they talk about in the article is like one of the other things Tanimura said is like one of the original development ideas. And I constantly refer to this example because I find it hilarious. But Lucatiel of Mira was originally named Don Quixote, and the Bell Dwarf was named Sancho or Pancho or something like this.
Something to those, yeah.
Yeah, and that was the comic relief companion of Don Quixote, and they were supposed to go through the world and find the hero in weird and silly adventures, and
they were meant to be a comic relief NPC duo in Dark Souls 2. Yes.
Yeah, but it just seems so strange to me. Number one, because Don Quixote obviously has a huge significance outside of Souls. Like it would just be super immersion breaking. But it's just like I can't picture that in a Souls game.
Well, and that's not even the only example. It's probably one of the most striking, but. From the things that people have discovered by delving into the game data of Dark Souls 2, and even just in the influences, the design of some of the existing game content, you look at the areas of the game, the geography, and there are areas that physically exist inside of other areas to a far more egregious degree than in the previous games, when the geography didn't make perfect sense in Dark Souls 1 either, but like
Dark Souls 2 was bad with that, and Earthen Keep into Iron Keep. Okay.
Yeah, the Earthen Peak and Iron Keep was one of the most egregious ones, but there was also the Doors of Pharos, I think, existed in the same space as Aldia's Keep and went right through it, or some other area existed in the same space as Aldia's Keep. There was stuff like that, and then there was the fact that the actual level design in Dark Souls 2 was very, very linear. Very linear. You did not see very much of Miyazaki's trademark switchbacks and shortcuts and complexity, which I've been noticing a great deal in Dark Souls 3. The complexity of the areas in Dark Souls 3 has been astonishing, even by the established standards in the Souls series. But in Dark Souls 2, there was very little of that. Aldia's Keep all the way through from even the woods was basically a straight line. The Doors of Pharos was a straight line unless you went off to do the side stuff. So many of the areas, like Black Gulch, was mostly a straight line. There were the couple of hidden caves in there, but that's the sort of thing that does not mesh with what President Miyazaki has talked about in the past, is his vision. In interviews, he's talked about how he likes to design levels with complexity, levels with multiple layers. He likes to design areas that have verticality, and that have places to explore and shortcuts and that kind of thing. So when you look at what Dark Souls 2 ended up as, presumably during the first half of its development cycle, which is usually when the areas begin getting built, because that's the stuff that takes the longest time, so they have to start on it well in advance. I presume that happened under Shibuya, as he was the first director, and I can kind of understand why someone might have walked by and taken a look over Shibuya's shoulder and said, "Oh shit, wait a minute, maybe we should do something about this." You know?
I'm back, by the way. I had to mute my mic for a minute. Go ahead,
fine.
Dragon.
I figured.
Welcome back.
No, I got nothing with that. I mean, Dark Souls 2 PvE bad.
I don't want to to make it sound like we're coming across and just shitting on Dark Souls 2. It's
because you are and we are. No,
I mean,
don't lie to people. Don't lie to people. It was a bad game. It was a bad game.
Well, no, I mean, I had my own preference, and that's fine, and I understand that people enjoy Dark Souls 2. But it doesn't change the fact that this is the development cycle of Dark Souls 2. This is how it happened.
Yes, and there are some unique difficulties which resulted in some problems Dark Souls 2 had. And this is. Go ahead, Frosty.
I was just gonna say, like, the neat thing is, like, you know, people give Tanimura a lot of shit. Like, what would Dark Souls 2 look like were it not for him? Or what would the game be without that kind of influence or change? And the other thing too is, you know, I didn't really play the DLC of Dark Souls 2, so I can't really comment. But I think that a lot of people would say the DLC is the better part of Dark Souls 2. At least for the PvE experience.
Well, I mean,
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, except for the third one. I think the third one's fucking garbage.
But still, I mean, that is something that we know for certain that Tanimura would have had full, like, directive or creative direction on. Well, and that would have been entirely him.
To that point, though, Frosty, one of the interviews with Tanimura specifically about the Ivory King DLC was the point about the fact that originally, and I was aware of this well before the interview, but I can talk about it now that the interview has happened. They were originally planning for that snowstorm in Ilium Lois to constantly damage you as long as you were in it. And I think even it still does in that side area, doesn't it?
I never played the third DLC. I have no idea.
I don't think there's an area that does that.
The side area where you fight the two tigers that with the lightning unicorns?
I don't think it damages you, no.
I'm failing to remember now. I could have sworn that maybe it did, but maybe I'm just mixing it up with the quote. But the point is, the original design concept for that area was that the blizzard would constantly damage you. And there was a quote from Tanimura in an interview saying something like, well, we decided to change that because we thought, wait a minute, that might not be fun. It's like, so the fact that only occurred to them that late in development, you know, I mean, props to them for trying, but okay, the Dark Souls 2 DLCs, I will agree, they are, by and large, better than what the original game was. I cannot speak to Scholar. I have not spent too much time with Scholar. But even the DLCs had some pretty egregious issues with their design, which even, I think, fairly late in development, people at Fromsoft were still picking up on them and saying, wait a minute, that probably isn't a good idea. So, you know, what's to be had there for the good, you know? Yes, they made better DLC, but they still seem to have been kind of lost, is the impression I get.
I suppose. But I mean, we talk about this, and I don't mean to, like, only be shitting on Dark Souls 2, but you get Spy and myself in the same conversation, and it's kind of inevitable.
Yeah, fuck you guys.
Well, but no, here's the thing, though, Frosty. Like, I can agree to disagree. I'm not judging people who like Dark Souls 2 because it did offer something that the other games didn't, which, you know, I think I've learned more, Dragon, from talking to you than I have from anything else, because I didn't do a lot of PvP in Dark Souls 2. And as I understand it, the PvP in Dark Souls 2 had some changes made to it that really were, I guess, a lot better from what people have told me than what some of the previous games offered. So
I think most people will say that they prefer the mechanics of Dark Souls 2, if not necessarily the level design or lore. Mechanically, they really like Dark Souls 2, and I think that's pretty fair.
Yes, and I'm prepared to take people's word for that. I'll take that on faith. But it's just when we get the guy on Twitter saying, "Stop shitting on Dark Souls 2. There's nothing wrong with it." Well,
there's stuff wrong with every single Souls game, but it's
but exactly,
it's easy
though,
to
you know?
pick on one.
So, you know, we have things about it that we did not prefer. There are some glaring flaws in it that we saw. We also see the glaring flaws in the other Souls games, but Dark Souls 2 is kind of a black sheep in the series, right?
One thing that I will say, and I don't mean to cut you off, is...
Go ahead, it's fine.
Just, like, if you look at all the different Souls games, so Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, and Bloodborne, there's so much variance between them. I mean, they're all the same sort of general idea and game, but there's enough nuanced differences that you're going to have people with very, very different opinions on what they think the ideal Souls game would be. And it's just, the community has become so large that there's just no way you're going to please everybody. It's just not possible. Like, a lot of design decisions are mutually exclusive with others. So it's not even as if you can make compromises. It's just like, it's one way or another. Like, Hyper Armor versus Poise, that we've been talking about forever, is a fucking fantastic example of that. People
Soul
who
level
like,
versus soul memory.
well, I think most people are.
Everybody hates Soul Memory.
I think most people
Everybody hates
are.
that.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's mutually exclusive.
It's
though,
mutually
is my
exclusive.
point.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
But
no, I
yeah,
think
like,
most sensible people see the inherent problems with soul memory as it was.
but yeah, like you and I have a preference to Demon Souls. I think a lot of people that have a preference for Bloodborne are probably a little bit more on board with the idea of Hyper Armor, or maybe people who like fighting games. Because, like I said, I do think that Hyper Armor system is a little bit more akin to a fighting game than anything else. Whereas someone who only really played Dark Souls 1 or started in Dark Souls 2, I can definitely see having a preference or a bias towards Poise as a system. So I just don't see how they were ever going to please everybody. And for the most part, I think, based on what people are complaining about Dark Souls 3, it seems relatively trivial in the grand scope of things. They did a pretty fucking good job about, including everyone, or at least including things that everybody kind of liked in some fashion or another. It like, one of the things I've said is Dark Souls 3 is Soulsborne greatest hits, but it still manages to be similar to the others. And I won't talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil you, because I know you haven't finished the game yet. But
well, no, it's fine. I actually can. One of the things I've noticed, which is one of the, I think, the bizarre dichotomies of Dark Souls 3 for me, is I've had a lot of trouble making up my mind on the amount of hand-holding Dark Souls 3 does. Because on one hand, Fromsoft is now trying to please two very different and really opposing sets of preferences. You've got the old school Souls veterans like myself, who've been around for a long time, and I have my own ideas about what the spirit of the Souls games is. And then you've got people who are newer to the series, not as familiar with it. They want to be able to get into it, but they have trouble with the more niche style of Demon Souls in particular, but really even to an extent Dark Souls 1. And so they want it to be a little bit more accessible to them. So what does FromSoft do in this situation? And the more I play Dark Souls 3, in the beginning of the game, I was noticing a lot of developer messages that were just straight up telling you where to go and what to do. Unprecedented in the Souls games. There were developer messages all over the Nexus in Demon Souls, but those just restated things that the instruction manual told you, like what the controls do and how to play. This is how to use your kick. This is how to break a shield. And fine. That's one thing. But Dark Souls 3 has had a lot of, even to the point I'm at in the game, I've just beaten the Dancer at this point. And even that late in the game, you beat the previous Lord of Cinder boss before the Dancer. They straight up teleport you to the next place you have to go. You get a cutscene and you're teleported there. And then you're handed a key item. There's a message on the ground telling you exactly what to do with the key item and where to use it. And when you approach the spot you're supposed to use the key item, there's not even a prompt. It's just an automatic takeover of a cutscene. That level of handholding is unprecedented in the Souls games. I don't care what examples you give. And I'm not necessarily furious about that. But my point is, that level of handholding has never been done up to now, right? But yet, at the same time, Dark Souls 3 has by far some of the most obscure and unfathomable complexity to its NPC quests. And shit
I knew that's where it was going.
If you were not part of an online community, you would never figure some of that shit out if you played the game like a regular end user and like a regular player. And I'm not saying that's bad, but when I look at that juxtaposition of, first of all the hand-holding, but then on the other hand, all of the obscurity, what I see there is FromSoft doing its best to please the veterans who wanted the complexity and the obtuseness, and at the same time still trying to give new players, and I really hate the term casual But the more, I guess,
You
the
elitist
less
fuck.
you know what I mean though. The newer player to the series, the one who doesn't have the skills transferring over from 3 previous Souls games, the one who just wants to get into it, see what it's all about, and they're at the same time trying to make it possible for that guy or girl to get through a first playthrough of the game without, sitting there tearing their hair out. So, I appreciate the effort FromSoft is making there. It makes for a goddamn weird experience for someone like me, but you're right. Frosty, you talk about how it's the best of, they're trying to please a lot of people, and really I think they've done an okay job of that from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't comment on any of that. I just play PvP.
You're just a PvP guy, yeah.
You're just concerned about the PvP, and so am I for the most part. But
yeah,
I just want honor duel PvP for maximum.
Actually,
let's talk about that then, Dragon. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is actually hilarious. One of the things that I recall reading recently is someone made a post about as a part of this discussion of, okay, well, how do we get in contact with FromSoft? You got to go to the Japanese audience because they at least kind of listen to the Japanese audience, or at least there's someone involved in the Japanese community. And then a lot of people are like, okay, well, what's the view of the Japanese community? Like, do they not see these same issues that we're having? Do they not think Poise is a problem? And someone made a big post about, what do the Japanese players kind of think about the game? And one of the things specifically is they think honor duels, like 1v1 fights, is like just sinful. It's awful. It's horrible, right? Yeah, and like their mentality is like, okay, well, the best thing is those 3 is invasions. First off, a 1-on-1 invasion, great. A 2-on-1 invasion, better. 3-on-1 invasion, that's the fucking holy grail. And if you can beat a 3-on-1 invasion gang squad, like that is the epitome of multiplayer in the Souls game. And it's neat to see such a stark contrast to what the Western audiences would think.
You know what though, Frosty? That makes perfect sense, because think back, especially to the NES era, the NES, SNES era, but in particular, because I think this is an example most people who are somewhere close to our age or who just love retro games will understand. Mega Man 2.
Only 90 kids remember that shit.
Well, Mega Man 2, right? The Western version of Mega Man 2 had a normal mode and or like a hard mode and a normal mode, I think. And the hard mode in the Western version was the only mode in the Japanese version. And this is something that Japanese players, I think, look for in games. It's always been a thing. They look for, well, shit, I want that challenge. And Frosty, the example of the 3v1 invasions is perfect. And that is why so many Japanese developers, maybe more in the past than now, would dumb down the difficulty of games that they exported to the West, or at the very least add an easy mode, because Western gamers, I guess they felt anyway that Western gamers would not be able to handle that it was too difficult. That might actually have been based on some sentiment or reception to harder games earlier on in the life of the video game industry. I'm not totally sure about that, but one way or the other, a lot of games that got ported over to the West, they got a
brain gaijin not to be able to pray.
Well, I don't.
Brain gaijin.
I'm not going to try and speak to that. I don't presume to understand whether it was just a prejudice or a stereotype on their part, or whether they genuinely thought it was simply that the games would not sell as well if they were not as easy. I don't know. That I'm not sure about.
Cowboy robber, shoot 'em up.
But that definitely makes sense as one of the differences in the priorities of Japanese players for what they enjoy, as opposed to Western players for what they enjoy. And looking at it in that context, I mean, what do you think, Frosty, Dragon?
Well, it's neat, like, because Dragon and I, we like, how much of your gameplay in the past like week, Dragon, would you say percentage-wise? It's just you at Pontiff just summoning people. 90%, 100%,
100%.
Yeah, that's just what we do. But yeah, it's kind of strange how there's so many different ways to play this game in such
Well, I
neat
mean,
and creative things.
it's not a surprise to me. I mean, that's not. I mean, I kind of figured that. I remember in Dark Souls 2, if you met up with a Japanese player, he's got jesters, havel pieces, and an ice rapier. Period. That's what he's got. I mean, he is using the most optimal shit, and he is buffing like crazy, and he doesn't like it when you fuck with him. He will decapitate, he will point down, whatever he can do. No, he'll do it. These are those people, and it's always Japanese players that are dressed like that, and they're using the most optimal shit. That is their mentality, and that goes outside of 1v1s. That goes into invasions. I mean, you know, most players I saw that were just strictly blues in Dark Souls 2, they were Japanese, and they came in with every buff and its brother, like they were ready. And it doesn't surprise me at all that they play to win. They play for the difficulty. They want the gank. They want that stuff. It doesn't surprise me at all.
But I think there is a difference in mindset, though, that they, again, I don't want to make assumptions, but from what I've seen, most Japanese players or people that I've interacted with are much more accepting of whatever the rules of the game are. And
yeah, if it's presented to them in that way as intended, they will use it, period.
Yeah, it's just whatever is acceptable within the confines of the game or the rules, they have just no bias or opinion. They'll do whatever they can to win. They'll use whatever option they have available to them. Mm-hmm. But there's this difference of they'll play within the confines and they'll adapt and change based on that. Like they'll fit the mold. Whereas I feel like a lot of my experience with, you know, people on Reddit or on my comments or different videos or on stream chat, the Western audience in general typically seems more expectant that the game changes to accommodate them rather than, as I say, fit the mold and just kind of accepting it for what it is and go for it.
That's what the difference in culture, like what I was talking about with like even just international trade. We've always catered our product to the people. And so the people have come to expect this. This is the Western audience.
A sense of entitlement, what you'd say, right?
Yeah, something like that, but more just, you know, this is the way it's always been done. You're presenting me a product. Is this product for me? No, I'm not buying it. That is the way we work, as opposed to, you know, Japanese audience where it's almost like it's not whether you can afford the game. It's whether the game can afford you. It's weird. Like they just don't. You get it or you don't. Period. And that's not how we don't do it that way. That's that culture difference.
Yeah, it really is the epitome of different just social and cultural values.
Yeah, we're expected to be catered for our money. It's not really a sense of entitlement. It's just, if I'm going to give you money, it better be what I want.
Gotcha.
As opposed to them.
I would call it pragmatism more than entitlement, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's just poor wording on my part. But
yeah, this is what I want.
We know what you mean. We're just to clarify for our listeners here, Frosty.
Sure.
So that we're not coming across as huge elitist pricks. Oh, heaven forbid.
Well, I don't know if that's happened or not, but
we can't even do that because we just have infighting because you're both bad at PvP, and I can sit there and shit on you. So
I'm not even going to attempt to argue that, Dragon. I know it.
Like, if we really wanted to get elitist here, talk about real duelists. Frosty.
You want to fight, bro?
Yeah. So, Dragon, how'd you place in that tournament?
Not very well.
I don't. Damn, fucking spy with the shit talk.
Not very well. And that comes actually. That's a good example because that comes to there's a difference at play here. There were people in the tournament who were using, you know, the best shit, and then there's people who weren't. And the people who weren't were like, yeah, I'm just here for fun, and I want to have like a good fight and whatever. And that's that separate mentality between the I'm going to win, I'm the best, it doesn't matter how I get there, I'm going to do it. And the other guys who were like, yeah, it's not hard to win with an S-Stock, so I'm not going to use it. Yeah, I mean, S-Stock was banned in that particular one, but I mean like Dark Sword and other things. So, I mean, it's kind of like that separation of mentality. So, I don't know. When you have a game that so many people play, especially with Dark Souls 3, where we've got a huge influx of new people and a huge influx of new opinions from new people, it's hard not to be elitist about things because they're coming in with these just blatantly wild ass ideas that you're like, what the fuck were you talking about, guy?
Can we talk about
Skyrim? I fucking let's talk about a better game, Skyrim. When I was playing, let me tell you about this other game I was playing, and Dark Souls just doesn't do that. It doesn't do what I want it to do from Skyrim, and it's hard not to be like that.
Well, can we talk about then? Dark Souls 3 needs an easy mode.
Please no.
Oh no. But see, like I said, that detracts.
But that's what I mean, Dragon, is because it's impossible to refute that statement without sounding elitist. Because no, Dark Souls 3 doesn't need an easy mode. You can summon 3 phantoms and gank just about any boss.
Yes.
You know, and you can keep invaders off your back with 3 phantoms. You could, fine, but why? Why would you need more than that? The easy mode is built into the game, and this goes back to working as intended. The design of the game is intended not to need a difficulty selection because you do all of that naturally. This is, obviously we don't want to get too much into this debate, but the point is, it is so difficult not to sound elitist when you say the game doesn't need an easy mode, because then people just interpret that as, oh, yours is like hard. You don't want new players being able to access it. No, the easy mode is already in the game. This is, again, it gets back to you adapting to the game rather than wanting the game to be adapted for you, right?
I think the design and the marketing of this game just breeds a certain mentality of elitism. Like, think of how the game has been marketed by Namco Bandai.
That hasn't helped.
Well, this game is brutally difficult. Prepare to die. Only the best players and the most hardcore will beat this game and play this game. It's super difficult. That's the mentality that your new kind of Souls player.
You'll lose your souls over and over.
Yeah. like people who are new to the series. I feel like that's how they come into this game, like expecting it to be a certain way. And that's one of the reasons why, like, whenever someone's like, oh, this is my first time playing the game, or I beat the game, this is the first game that I played, I'm like, okay, well, how did your experience change what your initial impressions were? And that's one of the most interesting things interesting questions I'll ask people. And it's neat how different that is. But you have this mentality that starts out where it's like, oh my God, I beat Dark Souls. I actually did it. I'm so much better than you. Like, it just builds this inherent elitism just because of the way the game's designed and marketed.
And we do it to each other.
100%.
Well, we do it to each other, ironically, if you're talking to 3 of us.
No, that's a lie. I'm better than Frosty. He's a bitch.
That's true.
Do I need to bring up that tournament again, Dragon? No,
but to be fair, the tournament, I would have placed better in that than Frosty would.
To be fair, you would never catch me entering a tournament like that because I know I'm not good enough for that shit at PvP.
Well, no, I mean, just even with the example of just us, like whether it's kidding around or we're being serious, I'm being serious with Frosty, but whether it's kidding around or not, that's how we treat each other. We're elitist to each other in the community. I mean, people look at Twitch chats, you see people pop in and they're like, oh, I noticed you had 30 fights, but you lost 2 of them. You're a faggot. Kill yourself.
That's within the community itself. Imagine people outside of the community. Right?
Oh yeah, when I ended up with this group of people who they were other streamers and other YouTube people. It was like this big, group of them. It was like a little party chat thing, and they had no idea who I was. And when they found out who I was, they were like, "Oh, you're a Souls player. You're one of those." That was the wording. You're one of those. I was like, "Oh shit." And they didn't know I was PvP. They didn't know if I was a speed runner or a challenge runner. They didn't know. They just knew I'm from that really weird, elitist, toxic community that hates everybody. I mean, it's funny we talk about the Japanese being xenophobic, but our community as a whole is like, go back to COD, you fag, like just everything.
Well, I think it's just people in general. It's just people in general. Well,
what about the credibility? Go ahead. Sorry, Frosty.
I was just going to say, like, kind of building on this topic that we were talking about, one of the most amusing responses that I got on Reddit with all this Poise drama that I've been talking about and responding on Reddit, one of the most amusing things that someone said to me was, this is entirely verbatim, This must be your first game. Go back and play Dark Souls 1 and 2. It's way more refreshing and the builds are way more varied. S-Stock is trash tier in every other Souls game because of Poise. And it just made me laugh. It just made me laugh.
You retweeted that, didn't you?
Yeah, I tweeted it out because I just thought it was so funny. This must be your first game. Go back and play Dark Souls 1 and 2.
Yeah,
it's just
Frosty.
that
Stop trying to tell me how to play.
but it's just that sense of elitism, or I know better than you. You must not understand. You must not understand because your opinion is different than mine. It's like it's so
you just
strange.
Don't get it, man.
Yeah, it's just I
don't get it.
Well, explain or maybe not explain, because I think this might defy explanation beyond a certain point. But one of the things that I've been hearing more and more frequently as the Souls community continues to grow and as the series becomes increasingly popular is that, oh, it didn't used to be this way in the community. Sure, we always had a toxic minority, but nothing like we have now. Oh, it all started at Dark Souls 2, and now it's worse with Dark Souls.
Yeah, like, there's always been a toxic minority. It's just there's just so many more of them that it's just more vocal. Like, one of the things that I've said is, look at Dark Souls 3 subreddit. There's I'll pull it up right now. But last time I checked, there was like 100. Yeah, there's 106,000 people in the Dark Souls 3 subreddit. It's one of the biggest subreddits on Reddit. Like, it's fucking massive. You never had that number of people previously. So no. I don't necessarily think the ratio of shitty people to normal people or to good community members has necessarily changed. I just think there's so many fucking more of them that they're just so much more vocal and loud.
Which are my thoughts as well. But taking this a step further, Frosty, one of the things that people who have been attempting to be very kind and supportive to me have frequently told me, and I've heard this so often. I'm curious, Frosty and Dragon both, as to your thoughts on this. One of the justifications, or maybe theories, explanations for the phenomenon of the increase in toxicity in the Souls community is this is just spoiled millennials with a sense of entitlement coming into the series for the first time at Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 3. This is not how I necessarily feel, by the way, but this is what I had been told many times. And, you know, how true do you think this is? Because I cannot for the life of me develop a meaningful sense of perspective on this matter. Is it just spoiled kids coming into the series, playing through Dark Souls 3 once and feeling like they're better than everybody? Or has this been going on since the beginning? Like,
this has been going on in every single community.
I think it's been going on since the beginning. I also think there is it's just, this is going to be a much broader talking point than I'm about to discuss. I think that the situation we're in right now as society is we have access to information in a way that has never before been the case. Yeah. If you think of, like, way back when, if you were in a small community and you had a shitty, stupid opinion, you didn't really have any other recourse
share your
other
than
ass
retarded
but you had to kind of address that, and you had to kind of either just buckle down or kind of rethink or critically analyze your position and adjust as a result. Nowadays, it's so much easier to just find like-minded people on Twitter, on Reddit, on any other form of social media, and just hide from that kind of
circle jerk.
Yeah, it turns into a circle jerk. It's like, I wish I had considered this a little bit more, because I feel like this is something I'd want to articulate in a better way. But there's just it seems so much easier to just avoid problems and circle jerk a specific opinion and never actually have to address it in a way that people used to have to do. Maybe
sounds
if that
like
makes
politics.
any sense. I guess,
well,
but that's what I mean. It's a broad topic in general. Like, yeah. So if you have this
tweet out your dumb opinion, you can make a post on Reddit about your dumb opinion, and you can have other people who agree with your dumb opinion that you never would have found in 20 years ago. You'd never would have met those people, even when the internet was kind of around, kind of. But I mean, like, it doesn't matter.
And it's just easier to.
There's 13-year-olds with iPhones.
Yeah. No, I get it.
That is. Like, I mean, whether that's a problem with society, that's not a Dark Souls thing or any of that. It's just people can complain more, and the community is getting bigger, and there's people who, You're going to have an influx of people, but it's not. They're so fucking vocal because see, I don't have that problem. In my YouTube comments, they say stupid things, but they're not bad people. I don't get many people popping in and go, "Oh, you kill yourself. You're bad at the game." I don't get that a whole lot.
I didn't used to till I did my most recent LP of Dark Souls 3. Funny thing about that.
Yeah.
That's your fault. I got nothing to say about that.
No, you're right. I went about it in the
totally your
wrong
fault.
way, but you know,
Everybody warned you not to do that, and you did it. And
everybody warned me. I warned everyone, and then I went and
Say it.
capitulated.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever. I'm just saying.
Fine.
But
No, I get it. I get it, Dragon.
But whatever. I mean, like, and you're gonna have, you specifically are doing something that a lot of people are doing, and you're gonna get those people who are just searching around YouTube, and they're gonna watch your video for 2 seconds. They've never heard of you ever in their life. They don't know what your content's about, and they're gonna look at that video and they're gonna go, "Wow, this guy talks a lot about bricks. Fuck him. It's the worst content I've ever seen in my life. I'm gonna tell him to kill himself. Hold on."
Yep.
Enter. And that's just simple as that. And then after he's done telling you to shove your own ass just like through a fucking blade of dildos, just like through the whole thing. After he's done doing that, he's gonna fucking, go get some coffee and move on to the next video and tell that guy the same exact thing. I mean, it's not like he's fuming over like you for the rest of the day. It's because it's simple. Like, he can just do it. Kill yourself, German spy. Next video. What's in my recommended?
I wonder how hypocritical.
rbFrosty. Nice Poise video. Fuck yourself. Kill yourself.
I wonder how hypocritical this podcast will come across, because we've basically spent the whole time just bitching and whining and circle jerking our own thoughts as well.
I mean, I was gonna say about 30 minutes ago, but we got on this. Like, I was gonna say in a positive note, I have enjoyed the patches for Dark Souls 3.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
it's been pretty spot on.
Like, I was pretty impressed how quickly they nerfed Thugs. I didn't have a huge problem with Thugs, but I mean, obviously it did way too much damage, and that was bam. First patch, day one, as soon as International comes out. Bam! Thugs gone. No English player has ever had to deal with Thugs. Ever. Only people who got a Japanese version. I mean, that was really shocking to me. I was surprised how quickly they jumped on that. I figured that would be like at least patch 3 thing or something. But no, bam!
No, I'm pretty fucking hopeful, to be honest. Like I said, Dark Souls 3 is one of the most balanced a Souls game has ever been on launch.
Mm-hmm.
And in a substantial way.
And we've gotten 4 patches in the past month, which is a lot more than there were in the earlier games.
Yeah.
1.04 in Dark Souls 1 took several months.
I think that's more than, and I'm just as a comparison to another AAA, I think that's more than Division got, and that was heavy multiplayer.
Really?
And I think the Division only got like 2 major patches and like 1 regulation patch after that in the first month. And I remember that specifically going, man, here's a AAA game that is all about multiplayer, and they were taking their sweet ass time on that, at least from what I saw. So I mean, like, it was interesting to see Fromsoft respond so quickly to complaints, even though what they did didn't work with like the Dark Moon Blades or any of that shit. At
least they're trying.
They at least address if there's an issue and that they're working with it, instead of just, like they did Dark Souls 2, where half the problems they never even talked about or wouldn't even say that they addressed.
They wouldn't acknowledge, yeah.
You'd have to look into it.
Durability.
At the same time, though, is Nick still like super banned?
Yes.
See, that, I just...
Yes, and that
it's
is
hard for me
issue.
to reconcile that.
PC Master Race.
Yeah, apparently.
Nice job, guys. Good job.
Well, and that goes back to the issue of FromSoft being aware of what people do in the West. We've discussed ad nauseum already.
See, I don't know about that one. I think that goes back to FromSoft being lazy as shit and using some crappy third-party program to detect cheating.
It's possible that that's a factor. I don't doubt it, but I mean just from the perspective of FromSoft not understanding, because they're a Japanese company and PC gaming is not such a thing in Japan as it is in the West, nowhere near, that they probably never thought about the fact that people might want to use controller support to be able to use a DualShock 4 controller on their PC. The same controller people are using on the PS4 and not getting banned for, but You know, that's because FromSoft, as we've discussed, may instead be thinking of it in terms of this is not the intended use of this software, rather than it's the same fucking controller, why not just cut people a break? That's what I mean about the limited way of thinking, the narrow-mindedness, and just really not keeping in touch with their community in the West, not keeping up with the times in terms of how PC gaming is done, in terms of the harmless, non-cheating things people do that modify an exe file. You know, I want to use controller support, I want to be able to play in like windowed mode or something, you know, like that kind of thing. I want to back up my save data in case some asshole invades my game, hits me with a hacked dagger, scrambles my stats, and gets me soft banned.
Yeah, but you know,
Right?
you're not playing the game as it's intended, though. You can't do that in Windows.
Oh.
It's not intended in Windows mode. You have to just sit there, stroke your cock over Miyazaki's grand vision. Can't be stopped. It's so
Why?
good.
Why is there no full screen windowed mode? The fuck?
Beats me. Probably because they don't know people want it.
The glory
Because-
of heaven, the shining rays down upon you. You are
I thought
blessed.
I thought you were
Blessed.
trying to be positive, Dragon.
Oh
Blessed
no,
by
that can't
Miyazaki's
last for more than a couple
sweet
minutes with Dragon.
touch. He's
Not
so
possible.
good. He's so good at everything. Never makes a mistake. He's the best. Play it as he intends. His dream, his vision. You're just a idiot Westerner you couldn't understand. That's why they turned the difficulty down for you people on the internet.
Do you guys actually?
Gaijin.
That's an interesting thought. How do you guys feel the difficulty of the game is? Like, I know you haven't finished the game, Spy, but up to this point, what do you think difficulty
It
wise?
is the most bizarre thing, and the best way I can summarize it is a tweet Marcus sent several weeks ago, in which he said he feels like FromSoft is having trouble designing bosses that are challenging enough for Souls veterans, but not too challenging for newcomers to the series.
Yeah.
This is the weirdest Souls game in terms of the contrast in its difficulty. I have had far more trouble with regular enemies than I have with bosses. It has not taken me more than 3 attempts to kill any of the bosses I have fought so far, and a good half of them first or second attempt. I was not over leveled for any of those points in the game. I was not over geared. You know, I had equipment that you can get without too much trouble in the early game. Like, I fought the Curse Rotted Greatwood without leveling up at all. It's soul level 7 or 9 or whatever the warrior class starts off as, using a raw battle axe, I think +3 or +4. And you more than have the means to obtain the upgrade materials for at least +3 at that point. You want to spend a little extra time shooting the dragon in the face. Yeah, fine. If you have patience, you can then go get one more Titanite shard by a trade to the Crow. So I don't buy any of the arguments that is overgeared for that point in the game. They more than give you what you need for it. I fought everything up through, I think, from Volnir onward with a +6 weapon. And, you know, the dancer with +6, they shove Titanite shards down your throat in the catacombs and the smoldering lake. So
Oh, yeah, they do.
you
Oh,
can
yeah, they do.
more than have enough. I think Abyss Watchers, I fought them with a +4 as well. So, you know, that was what I had up to that point. Nothing overgeared. I leveled up just enough to use the Great Axe in one hand. I didn't put any points into Vitality, no extra HP. I've been doing it with like base HP for my starting class. And
Well, I mean, I think the difficulty is a bit different from, you know, what you're kitted for and what the actual enemies do. I mean, like,
but even
I
in
think-
terms of enemy behavior, like boss behavior, seems like the bosses they have these egregious blind spots and weak points. The gimmicks are what really get me. Like,
there's a
Volnir.
couple that do that, yeah.
Volnir, the Curse Rotted Greatwood, and the Curse Rotted Greatwood, fine, but, you know, Volnir, like, my first attempt at Volnir, I walked up to his hand before the fight started and thought, oh, I'd better buff and get ready for this. Maybe I'll get the opening attack on his hand. So I charged up a two-handed R2 with my Great Club +6 that was buffed with charcoal pine resin, instantly broke his bracelet on the opening attack. From that,
Seriously?
yes, from
Holy
that,
shit.
immediately figured out what the gimmick was, went down, swung twice, broke his second bracelet. While he was recovering from that, I walked over and broke his third, and that was my fight with Volnir.
Yep. Yeah, he's crap. He's crap. The Greywood is crap.
Yorm.
Dude, Volnir is one of my favorite fights. If you do that fight again, Spy, with an unupgraded weapon and the fight takes a while, he does all these super cool things, and like his presence and that whole experience of the proper fight is fucking incredible, especially with the music going on. And like
I went back and fought him on a lower level character with a Flamberge, and yes, I got the full experience. But let me put it this way: Volnir's design, the concept behind the fight, great. You know, I like that. I appreciate that. But mechanically, he has some fundamental problems, and this is something I've noticed with almost all of the gimmick boss fights in Dark Souls 3 so far, is that they are weighted so heavily toward making you use the gimmick in order to defeat them.
Yeah, if maybe the bracelets, when they broke, only did a certain amount of damage and he still had some left.
Exactly, like that's what I was
sense. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Or that like the gimmick alone, like Yorm was a fantastic fight until I figured out that you basically had to use the gimmick in order to kill. And then the gimmick, like I went in for Yorm and I didn't realize what the gimmick was at first. So I'm attacking him with, you know, a very powerful weapon, a great axe. At that point, it was a great axe +7, heavy great axe +7 on a pure strength build. You know, I still only had the 32 strength necessary to wield it, but I've got Lloyd's sword ring. I've got a couple of regeneration items that are keeping the Lloyd's sword ring in effect. You know, I'm hitting him for 170 damage, and it's clear he's got 30,000 HP. This is gonna take fucking all day.
And it was obvious at that point you had to do something.
Yes, at that point it became blatantly obvious. Okay, there's a gimmick
hey, what's going
here.
on, Vendrick? How you doing?
Yeah, so, you know, then I saw the item on the other side of the boss room, picked it up, and I knew immediately. And
well, I mean, it's fucking named Storm Ruler. Like, you kind of know exactly what's happening, but...
Now, here's the thing. It took me a couple of tries to figure out how to use the gimmick to realize that, okay, you actually have to hold its stance for about 10 seconds to charge it and then perform a weapon art swing with it.
Which is bullshit, because I thought it should be where if you buff it and it's like all, you know, swirly whatever, then your regular attack should do like way more damage.
Which is what I thought, but it turns out the reason they did that was because they want you to have to wait and be vulnerable while you're charging it, because otherwise 5 hits of that charged Storm Ruler kill him. It does 5,000 damage each hit. And that's what ruins that fight for me. The gimmick is really cool. I think it's a great way to remix the Storm Ruler gimmick, but it's the only fucking way to kill him. I feel like...
And I agree. That's great.
Make him take normal damage from regular weapons and don't shoehorn players into using nothing but the gimmick, and that fight would have been great.
Actually,
you know?
And fuck you if you like going through new games.
I have to interrupt here. I was watching. So one of my buddies, Sonos, who's
I know Sonos.
Yeah, also on Soulbrand, really awesome guy. He was playing a magic character as his actual playthrough. He was headshotting Yorm with soul spears for like multiple hundreds of damage, like 500-600 damage. He got Yorm down to like 20% health without ever using the Storm Ruler. He ran out of Estus, like mana Estus, like he couldn't do any more damage. But he legitimately thought, like, oh, this is one of the few like challenging bosses. Oh, this is where the game actually picks up. This is where the game's actually going to pick up. And it's like, oh no, he just completely almost beat the boss first attempt without ever finding the gimmick. And it just, that makes me laugh uncontrollably.
But the irony there is, though, that that's not the intended way to do that fight. And that's what I mean. People constantly yell at me about, well, why aren't you playing the way I want? Why do you refuse to put 3 points into dexterity? You know, why can't your play style be more like mine? What the earlier games accommodated that, but some of these boss fights, you have to use the gimmick. Like, and what I see that as is this is their way of giving new players this really cool looking boss and the feeling of, oh my god, I defeated this really cool boss with 30,000 HP that took no damage from everything. Like, this is their way of getting those players through the game. And that, I feel, more than anything, is what really compromises the experience for me. Like, give me a way to beat Yorm without using the gimmick. Let me do regular damage to him. Make it viable for me to fight him with a regular weapon and not be here all day, you know? Because I'm gonna, unless I fight him perfectly without getting hit ever, and even then the fight's gonna take 4 hours, I'm going to run out of Estus long before I dent his HP the way that fight is designed.
If he had like a third of his health, but the Storm Ruler did a third of its damage, I think that'd be pretty fucking awesome. Because you could legitimately just kill him without it if you really wanted to, but he'd have 1,000,000 health and it would be...
And the point is that then people who didn't want to use the gimmick could have their challenging fight. Whereas, you know, right now, clearly the design of those fights is you use the gimmick. And it's the same with Volnir. And Volnir, I feel like, is even more of a shame in some ways, because that's the classic syndrome of FromSoft's enormous boss with huge blind spots. How do we cover up his glaring weaknesses that would otherwise make him a joke? Give him an instant death, or basically instant death, like 500 HP a tick damage aura near his body so you can't get close to him. Make his only weak points those bracelets. And at phase 2, start dropping regular skeletons in and, you know, give him a sword, which is still ridiculously easy to dodge. So that's what I mean, where, you know, there I feel like they're covering for design flaws in the boss.
But again, and they're just catering to the gimmick. I think it's just because they want the new players to be able to kill it.
They're pushing you to use the gimmick. Like, if that fight were viable, if you could do that fight without the ads, but also without the ability to 3-shot him with those bracelets, and if he took a little more damage, maybe, great. That would have been an awesome fight. You know,
every game's had that, though. Every game's had that. Like Dragon God from Demon Souls. The only way you can do that is to avoid.
And that was bullshit. I mean, that's
I don't disagree.
I'm not saying those are good. That was a shame. But like, that's what I mean. FromSoft designs these boss fights exactly like the Dragon God, and the Dragon God was terrible. The Bed of Chaos was terrible. You know? Like,
gotcha.
I'm not saying they didn't exist in previous games. I'm saying do something a little bit different, balance them differently, and they might actually be good fights for both veterans who want the challenge and new players who still want to be able to just clear the fight with the gimmick.
I suppose maybe that's more akin to like the Tower Knight, where people, obviously the gimmick is his ankles, but you could get up onto the rafters where the archers are and you could shoot him in the face with bows or magic and kill him that way if you wanted to as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, even with his ankles, you had to get into the fight and you had to get, hit him in a certain way.
Yeah, but that's the melee play style. You use the ankles. If you're going range, then you go up and you shoot him in the face.
Right, you can,
if you're a mage, you can just
actually,
shoot
now
him
that
in
I
the
think about
ankles
it,
as well.
That's true, and now that I think about it, Adjudicator was like that as well. You either hit the gimmick in his stomach, or you can shoot him from range with the bird on his head. Yeah, okay, I see.
Options.
I see the point. Yep, I get it.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like
Dragon God, where it's like, oh, go run ballista, run other ballista up, and now go hit his chin.
Exactly. And the Curse Rotted Greatwood, the ads in that fight are not a problem. They're not over aggressive.
They're just annoying. Like they're non-existent.
They don't ruin the fight, which is, to me, unusual in a FromSoft game. That stupid ads dropped in frivolously do not just make the fight unnecessarily irritating. But, the ads are fine, but make it so that the tree takes regular damage, or maybe slightly reduced damage on the rest of its body. You only get 2 or 3 of those weak points on its body. They don't kill it all the way. They're not the only way to kill the enemies in Bloodborne's Chalice dungeons, where that gimmick came from, those undead giants. You only got at most 2 of those tumor things you could attack, and they would do a shitload of damage, but you still had to get his health down the rest of the 60% it took to kill him, and that was fine. Those enemies were great.
All right, we'll summarize
That's
argument.
Hilarious. I hadn't even considered that.
the fucking gimmicks are bad, and the gimmicks are strong in this one, and they're bad. I mean, it's just, I can't continue. I feel like I can't continue because I have some complaints about some later bosses you haven't fought yet, Spy. So I mean, like, I don't know.
I may end up with those same complaints, Dragon. It depends. But like, people have been swearing to me up and down, oh, Spy, the game stops holding your hand after the undead settlement. The game gets more challenging after, the road of sacrifices. And most of the challenge I've encountered so far has just been me getting used to the way the enemies work in this game. Not so much.
Well, and it's so difficult because there's a couple of enemies in the game, that are obviously designed for Souls, and then there's other enemies that are obviously designed for Bloodborne.
The dogs, are good.
Well, the Bloodborne dogs, the guys who fucking stagger when you roll into
exactly.
Like, no other enemy has ever done that, and until Bloodborne, and how they have these dudes who do the same shit, and those guys in the Yorm's place, the profane capital, also
the jailers there.
Oh man, that was an easy speed run. Let me just roll into these fucking idiots. Like,
and the thing from Bloodborne, where with the dogs, when you shot them with a gun in Bloodborne, they'd go flying 15 feet. They still do in Dark Souls 3 when you shoot them with a crossbow, which, cool. That's a great way to deal with them if you have a ranged attack, or a firebomb. If you hit them with fire, they're lying on the ground waving their legs in the air for 5 minutes. That kind of thing, cool. But when you get into the realm of like, okay, why is this design element that was specifically meant for Bloodborne being brought back? Oh, wait a minute. The enemies that stagger when you roll into them, they're clustered together in huge groups in the undead settlement, and it's just the game's way. Okay, look, here is a huge a huge mob of enemies. You can roll into them, and that becomes a trivial encounter now.
Well, I mean, like, you look at bosses that are like Pontiff. Like, he's an example I use. Like, that is an obvious Bloodborne boss. That guy and his combos, where he just keeps throwing them out. It is obviously intended for you to be like able to, sidestep to his back, hit a couple of times, back off, kind of thing. But in Souls, you can't do that. You're rolling in front of him. You're doing forward rolls and whatnot. You're not rolling, to his back, because you don't cover that same distance that quickly, and you don't have that spammable thing. I mean, he's made to catch you in rolls.
And he
does.
That's
what Bloodborne bosses do. They catch you in those dashes. They're not throwing down a big slam down attack. No, they go fucking berserk, and they fucking throw their arms around in multiple directions, and with
the clone in the Pontiff fight too.
Exactly. Like, fuck
twice.
Me. I'm not saying he's hard. I'm not saying this is difficult. I'm saying this boss was not designed for a Souls game.
Felt like, it's funny you should say that, because when I first fought him, the first impression I got from him was, this is basically Gwyn. And then, of course, I found out later you can parry him, and then it really seemed like Gwyn. Because you've got that same sort of super agile enemy with super fast attacks, with really long reach. He's really good at catching you in rolls, and he can clear tons of distance very quickly.
And he clones himself.
Yeah, well, Gwyn doesn't clone himself, but I mean, I
mean him. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah. And then
ridiculous.
He's got that same huge AoE with the clone, and so that kind of thing. I felt like it was probably the most challenging fight I'd encountered in the game up to that point, and I appreciated it for that. But, it did feel a little bit strange to me.
Yeah, because he's not a Souls boss. He's a Bloodborne boss. Like that to me. I mean, that's just the way he feels. Like,
maybe that's what it was.
He's like a larger version of that bitch from the DLC, the lady. He's like a
Lady
larger
Maria,
version
whatever.
of that. Yeah, whatever. Like, I mean, she's doing the AoE and the slashes and the spins.
I got a lot of Allant from him from Demon Souls.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of that too, but Allant was catered to fighting your character. Whereas this guy is looking for
as
a
was
hunter.
Gwyn. And I got a lot of Allant from Gwyn too,
Yeah, that's fair.
Other than that, you couldn't parry Allant, which I felt like Allant.
Bosses
Well, so here's the other thing is
you.
this is how we're thinking about these bosses. It reminds me a lot of this. It reminds me a lot of this. Like, this is game number 4. This is Soulsborne number 4. Like, there's only so many ideas and so many ways you can do this. I mean, how much of it is just fatigue because you know, we have played these
Well, it
games
might
so
be,
much.
but it's the first time because it's after Bloodborne that we're getting bosses that are super hyper aggressive like that, and that are so,
Or enemies even that are.
they are designed to catch you in your rolls instead of just hitting you. And that was a Bloodborne thing, as opposed to 1 and 2, which were not. It was like, oh, I'm doing my attack. You better roll. There's my attack. I might have a follow-up. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, like, see, there's one guy I want to mention, but I know Spy hasn't fought him yet. So
I know exactly who you're going to talk about. But
the Lothric Knights are a good example of that, though, even as a regular enemy, that they are pretty damn good at catching you in rolls. They'll delay their third swing often so that you'll roll out of the second and get hit by the delayed third. They shield bash you when you try and roll behind them, when you try and strafe.
And then tracking is ridiculous. Like they're designed to fight a character that has the dashes from Bloodborne. That's the way it seems to me.
They're designed also, I think, to throw off people who are used to the Dark Souls 1 system of circle, strafe, and stab. Like, you try that with the Lothric Knight, they'll break your guard, and then they'll eat your face. And I think, yes, FromSoft wanted to make it so that you didn't just have the same old circle, strafe, backstab fest you did in Dark Souls 1, and even to some extent in Dark 2. Although in Dark 2, enemies rotating faster than you kind of put the kibosh on that with their tracking. But you know, I appreciate that from a certain point of view. It just feels kind of strange to fight enemies like that now. That they do feel like they were meant. Yeah, they
shields, you know, that have more stability than fucking Catholic Church.
They do feel like they were meant for Bloodborne, for that kind of thing. And I don't think it necessarily makes it a bad experience. But it definitely feels strange for Dark Souls, I guess, for that franchise's standards.
Well, it does, and it's just not. I don't see there's certain enemies in the game that I don't feel were made to fight my character. They were made to fight Bloodborne character, and I feel that way. And I mean, I obviously that's subjective, but I feel like wow, that guy had literally 7 attacks.
Well, all of this is subjective, of course. You know, these are just observations
but I mean,
and opinion.
A boss
of course,
that has
somebody is going to be
attacks.
yelling at us for being wrong, because of course we're all wrong about everything.
No, nobody's going to watch this video.
Thanks, Dragon. I appreciate it.
I don't know why you keep inviting me.
That's great.
You keep inviting me. I don't know why, but you keep doing it.
Oh, that'll change. Don't worry.
But I don't know,
I'm sure.
You want to talk about Lady Maria, though, Dragon. Like, the most Lady Maria vibe I got from any boss was the Abyss Watchers. And I'll go on record right now as saying I felt that fight was fantastic. The Abyss Watchers, the beginning of that fight, phase 1, my initial reaction was, oh, fuck, not another goddamn multi-enemy boss fight. And then I saw how the multi-enemy aspect worked. And Wooly from Super Best Friends Play, I was with them playing Demon Souls on Twitch last week, and Wooly had a great way of putting it, where the beginning of that fight, you first go, ah, shit, ads, and then after a minute you go, ah, yeah, ads.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're fair. You can backstab them. You can parry
They
them.
are like it's like fighting
and if
a
they
room
hit
full
each
of...
other. They fight each other. That's the coolest shit.
Exactly. It's just the design of that fight is appropriate. The ads aren't just some normal enemy that were dropped in because it wasn't difficult enough. They make sense. They're there for a good reason. They balance the fight rather than unbalancing it. And when you get to phase 2, it is just straight up Maria. It's a one-on-one duel. And Maria was one of the best fights, I think, in Bloodborne for that reason. You know, like it was just
one of
the
my
Abyss
favorites,
Watchers.
yeah.
Fantastic.
I think it's funny when Bloodborne, the best bosses in that game were other hunters. Like,
yeah, the duels. Gascoigne and Maria, right?
Yeah,
I liked that. I
and
liked
Gurman.
the way they moved. Yeah, Gurman was great. He's my favorite fight.
Yeah,
he's my favorite fight from that whole series. Was him walking up with that scythe, being an edgelord, and then fucking like the weird little dashes he does, and catching you in your roll. Like it was not a person. Like you didn't feel like you're fighting another player, but you felt like you were playing something that was, like a player but better.
Well, yeah, he does. He has all the same tools that you have. He's just the OG, and he does everything way fucking better than you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like that guy in the cathedral.
Yeah, like he's the he's,
bro.
Fuck that guy.
yeah.
Fuck that guy.
Oh no, but no, like Gehrman is Dante's Virgil. You know, he's the rival battle against your cooler, more badass counterpart.
Yeah.
And you know, even Gascoigne and Maria, for God's sake, like fantastic fights. And you know, when I feel like when FromSoft does a fight like that, well, I can't help looking at all of the multi-enemy boss fight shit like the Royal Rat Authority, and you know, countless like. I can't help thinking they do that by accident. And honorable mention to the Royal Rat Vanguard, because although it was a multi-enemy boss fight and although it was kind of a silly gimmick, that shit was legitimately kind of funny.
Mhm.
And you could do it without Poise.
You could do it without Poise. You know, you could do it at low levels, for God's sake.
Oh, that's amazing.
And if you wanted to break it, you could walk in there and spam WOG or Chaos Firestorm and win.
It's funny. It's a funny
Yeah.
fight. I love how he had a mohawk and the other ones didn't.
It's hilarious, but like that's the thing. It's like, oh, I know which one I need to attack now. It's like, yeah, that was kind of cool. I appreciated that. And then fucking the Duke's dear Freya. Oh, she's too weak on her own. We better throw infinitely respawning spiders in.
I will say that some of the bosses in Dark Souls 3, actually a majority of the bosses in Dark Souls 3 are some of my favorite fights in the series entirety.
Really?
Like, well, even
Well, you said that about Bloodborne. You sure not because it's new?
no,
You
I
might
really
say
like
that 'cause
I really
it's
like
new.
Bloodborne. Let me rephrase myself a little bit. I think Dark Souls 3 has some of the best iterations of these different types of encounters. Like, for instance, the what's it called? The Crystal Sage or whatever in this game is Pinwheel
Fool's Idol.
and a Fool's Idol, but probably the best implementation of both.
Yeah, until he breaks.
Until it breaks. Yeah, that's fair.
I've never had
But-
him break. Why? What happens?
He infinitely spawns those crystals until your game crashes. Like they just
Oh,
Yeah.
he never spawns, and the crystals just keep happening, and
It
it's
is
just
awesome. Yeah.
it knocks you offline. And I think it's a PC only thing because it says it'll knock you offline because your frame rate is no longer adequate for online mode. It's pretty great.
oh my God.
GG Crystal Sage, you fucking asshole.
That's another stupid thing. Why is FromSoft now tying your frame rate to kicking you offline? Like,
No, I agree.
Well,
with
frame
that.
rate has always been a huge thing mechanically for the Souls games. They've tied a ton of mechanics to frame rate.
but that's what I mean. Like, durability, they should have known better than that.
Well, I'm not
Wow.
saying it's a good design decision. I'm just saying that's typical
that's always
for them.
Yeah, no, I know. I know.
It's very typical.
Oh.
Dark Souls 2 can't be played in less than 60 frames. It's just so bad. And so it has to be 60 frames because it's
Oh.
designed around 60 frames.
What,
just strangely enough.
What have you been playing on Spy? PS4 or PC?
PS4, because I have one of those GPUs that could not handle Dark Souls 3 without overheating.
When are we gonna dual spy? Oh,
There it is.
oh.
Well, one of the things I wanted to mention was I've been
Anytime,
playing.
if you like winning, Dragon, I'm not going to be like,
Well, let me tell you, I love doing that. So let's hook up and have a good time.
One of the things I was going to mention is like I've been playing a lot of PC because so many people have switched over to PlayStation 4. I kind of feel the need to counterbalance that, I guess.
No,
But
fuck you. Play more on PS4.
I'll play both. 100% I'll play
You
both.
won't. You won't.
Yes,
You
I
won't do it.
will.
No, you're gonna make 2 more builds that are crappy and take forever to make.
I've got
on
like
fucking
I've got like
PC.
7 builds that I want to make right now, actually. And people talk about there's no build diversity. Blah, 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 blah. Anyways,
Yeah, when those fail, you'll figure out they're right.
well, we'll get to that point when we come there. But I forget what I was talking about now. You son of a bitch. Oh, the
You're
PC the PC version of the game has the recent 1.4 or 1.41 patch or whatever. It's caused a lot of problems. I have this weird
it has.
constant
so I've
stutter.
heard.
Yeah, it's this weird like constant freezing that's introduced to that, and it's the most annoying thing. I've been dealing with that all day today, and I don't know.
Yep. that's
This
the
is
big
what I
one.
mean about FromSoft not understanding PCs, though. Like, which is ironic because they were originally a PC software company.
Really?
Yes.
It's
But
amazing.
like, I got the impression they made office software, you know,
Sure,
like
sure,
for
sure.
account. But you know, now they can't. They don't know a GPU from a motherboard. It seems like
They're having trouble. Not a
they're
problem.
having a little bit of trouble.
Little trouble. But hey, PC Master Race, right? You guys are having fun. You guys are doing it, having a good time. You having fun over there, Frosty, on PC?
Mhm.
Stuttering along through the game. Good shit.
It
Like
is
falling
indeed.
through the floor for no reason or crap not rendering properly. Let's fucking go.
Dragon,
bro.
you continue ragging on Frosty. I need to get something to drink. I will return in just a moment.
Well, I think this is a pretty good time to end it then, because we've actually been going for quite a while.
It may be that we reconvene when I've actually beaten the game and you don't have to.
Dude, honestly, the moment you're done, you fucking let me know, and we'll
I
record another one of
will.
these.
Believe me, I will.
Well,
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out. It was a ton of fun, as usual.
It's been a pleasure, of course.
If you guys want to plug your channels and do all that awesome stuff.
I'm bro with the fro. I really like it when you talk about anime in my chat and racial stuff. I like talking about racial stuff and anime at the same time. Bro with the fro at twitchtv.com. Check me out.
You're a horrible
Okay.
person.
All right, fine. Well, my name is Patrick Boivin, and I'm with Super Best Friends Play. You can check us out over on YouTube at The Switcher. The I in The Switcher is replaced with a 1. Yeah, go check out our stuff. It's fantastic.
Do you see what you've done to him, Dragon? You're just a horrible influence on Spy.
It's good stuff.
Poor,
It's good stuff.
poor
It's
Franz.
called playing along.
Would you stop complaining, Plague? You complain all the time. Stop
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so
My name's
this is-
Eli. Okay,
This
thank
is
you.
Plague
God.
of Gripes.
Yep.
Uh,
No, but honestly, DropoutDragon, you can find him at the DropoutDragon Twitch TV, a German spy as well.
no, you don't have to plug me, Frosty. I don't think I want any more attention at this point. Not till can put this LP of DS3 behind me.
Fair enough. Well, I am rbFrosty.
They know that it's your channel, you dumbass.
It's very true. You're such a dick. You know, fuck you. We're done. This is it. Game over. I'm ending it
Bye,
right here.
everyone.
Goodbye.